Okay. Welcome to my talk on strategic change management with Kanban. Weird title, I know. I'm Siegfried Kaltenecker, Managing Director of Loop, a small, believe it or not, it's really called Loop, a small consultancy firm based in Vienna, specialized in management, coaching, and leadership training in the IT and finance business. And I've already been involved in a lot of companies. I've seen a lot of efforts as to successfully drive change. And as we heard before, there's some contradiction in terms involved. However, besides that, I had the pleasure to co-author a book that is still not translated into English. Sorry for that. But it's called Kanban in the IT, and it's around achieving a culture of continuous improvement. And part of my talk will refer to what we've already came up with. Some stuff, as you will find out immediately, is more telling you about experiments I'm deeply involved in at the moment, and also about my own uncertainties, whether or not that is the right approach. Today, and besides that, just you might wonder what the blog is about. We set up a couple of years ago a blog called Platform for Agile Management, and we would like to provide, or do provide, resources for leaders and organizations within an agile environment. So what I would like to cover today, and what's kind of I call it classically agenda. First of all, I would like to provide a brief definition of what change management with Kanban is about. The second topic I would like to cover for sure is the why question, because why do we need to change the way we change? So what's the problem statement behind that? Once I've defined the problem around change management, and in this talk I would really like to focus on the bigger picture, so I'm not talking just about introducing Kanban, Agile or whatsoever. I'm really talking or try to line out how to combine and how to align all the change initiatives that are currently going on within your organization. So that's a bit more complex, probably. But nevertheless, the question is what Kanban can do for you, for me, for us. And I brought a few case studies, a few concrete examples with me, mostly from companies within Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, where I currently try to do my best to apply this approach of change management with Kanban. So, finally I will distill some of the lessons I've learned so far. And what's in it for you, hopefully at least, is that I would like, so in the talk, and what I hope that is kind of a takeaway for you, is that you feel encouraged to run your own experiments based on hopefully a kind of increased sense of urgency that there is really something to do. Yeah. So that should be, or hopefully is in it for you. What's in it for me? Esther kindly warned you up front that there will be time for some conversations. I'll build on that, because lastly, I would also like to learn from you, as it is a kind of a new approach, at least from my point of view. I would like to get some feedback. So the basic question is just how does that resonate with you? It's not the usual Q&A, but it's really about, what is your thinking around that? Okay, what brings me directly to the promised brief definition of what change management with Kanban is about. And basically it's about, for sure, changing the way we change. Again, as seen on a strategic level, so mostly I'm dealing with examples with one exception of at least running or coordinating change initiatives on a department level, if not on a business unit or organizational level. So, secondly, how do we change the way we change? What I tries to combine state-of-the-art leadership and change know-how. And as it seems to be usual to quote Lewin, I also have a quote from Kurt Lewin to offer. It's there's nothing more practical than a good theory. And yeah, for sure, we should be informed about what is going on. We should read. We should have some principles. But nevertheless, it's not enough if we want to help people, who help managers within organizations. We need a more pragmatic approach, and that is what I'm trying to do with a rather eclectic combination of practices from Lean, Agile, and Kanban. And eclectic means not just on an accidental basis, but really a tailor-made combination of that. And finally is about, so why are we doing that? For sure, it's about not working anymore. Okay, why not? Interesting, because my final point would be the why question on this is that I think there is a strong need to improve in terms of return on change investment. So I'm not just talking about the economic return, but there's also a level of if people are motivated or not, if people feel passionate about change. And as we all know, I will ask you in a minute how you feel about that, but as I can observe at least, there is a lot of change fatigue and a lot of frustration around change initiatives going on currently in many organizations, at least throughout Europe. Yeah. So now we have a technical problem to solve. Let's see if that works like that. Guys, could you help me? Somehow it gets stuck. Yeah, well, I think it's not the remote, is it? No, it doesn't work. Sorry, guys. Yeah, probably it's...
So we have to restart... Is it losing focus? It's a Mac, is it?
Yeah, it's a Mac. Oh, okay.
That was it.
Okay. Here is the strategic view I was talking about. And yeah, before I come to tell you a little bit more about what I see as a problem statement that encourages to change the way we change, I would like to ask you and know from you guys, how many of you have been involved in change initiatives or have observed change initiatives in their organizational environment? Let's say, so at least one or more change initiatives over the period of the last 6 months. How many of you? Okay. Yeah, many. And now, hand on the heart, how many of you think these initiatives were successful? Okay. Kind of. Well, it resonates with my experience. And it also tells me how difficult, or I would like to underscore how difficult it is to effectively help change initiatives becoming successful. So why? I would like to line out in a minute. Yeah. So, as it is about change, I'll try to change a bit. So, what's actually the problem with change? And what is my statement about? And I would like to focus on 4 different areas. The first one is, and it shouldn't come as a surprise, a lot of change initiatives as seen not just a single one, but as a combination of different things, especially in large organizations. There are tons of initiatives, smaller and medium-sized and really large ones going on in parallel. And a lot of these initiatives are non-transparent or invisible. And let me just start with one anecdote. A couple of weeks ago, I facilitated a workshop with senior managers of a German telecommunication provider. And these senior managers were keen to come up with a fancy new strategy for 2013, as they used to do. And they were smart guys, so they reviewed a lot of data from 2012, operative business, return on blah, 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 a lot of spreadsheets and so on. And they were busy for around two hours before I kind of naively asked the questions if they didn't do any changes, because there was nothing on change there, nothing on what they initially planned and where they were currently going on, so what the status of the change initiatives were about, let alone what the returns looked like. And they kind of went pale and tried to reconstruct, because the main problem was that they didn't know about what was currently going on within the whole organization. So they just knew a few initiatives, mostly for sure the ones that were taking place in their area of responsibility, and they reconstructed or somehow reviewed the total number of unbelievable 23 initiatives in parallel. Yeah, and probably that resonates with you in terms of might be not a single case where we enter into organizations where a lot of change is going on without even noticing what is going on. And for sure, as Mark yesterday said quite brilliantly, or was it Monday? Monday, sorry. It's not about that we are not used to kick off initiatives, because there was a lot of effort to kicking it off and making it visible and more or less for fuss. But then most initiatives tend to go somehow underground. Yeah, there is a change agent who has this plan, and it's all about what Esther said about the classical, I want to get from A to B, so what's the plan about to do so? And then even more of a problem is that instead of inspecting and adapting on a regular basis, most efforts are spent to somehow make sure that there is conformance to the plan. So we get lost of all the opportunities that are coming up, and also we get lost of all the blockades that caused by parallel initiatives. Yeah? Just to give you one example, and that leads us also to the second topic, or the second part of my problem statement, that there are too many initiatives. Currently, or recently, I've been involved in an organization, thanks to Peter Hannemark, who brought me to South Africa. It was a South African company. However, they tried, on the one hand, they tried to, or still trying to establish an agile mindset throughout the organization. And they're really spending a lot of effort, don't they? So it's really about, yeah, we take this thing seriously. Whereas at the same moment, on the other hand, they started an initiative to come up with better cost controlling, forcing people to do all this fancy stuff with Jira and budgeting and counter-budgeting each other and blah, blah, blah. So what I'm trying to point out, too many initiatives is not just the full problem. Yeah? It's enough that we have too much in parallel, but rather than complementing each other, many initiatives tend to contradict each other, as with the example. So there, on the one hand, there is trust that we can build on self-organizing dynamics, yeah? Whereas at the same time, on the other hand, it's a lot about the classical command and control style. Does that make sense to you? Yeah? And I've seen that quite often, and it's really not a trivial problem to solve, yeah? As we will see. So if you want to take, we heard about metaphors or analogies. If you want to have an analogy, it's what I often see is kind of, undergoing a series of medical treatments at the same time, focused on organizational health. Yeah? And let alone how do people feel, as we've heard before. If that is too dramatic, picture yourself sitting in a restaurant, ordering really nice food, but the staff somehow screws up and serves you one course after the other without giving you the opportunity to finish even one course, let alone digest. And if that resonates with you, for me, it's a wonderful analogy what I see taking place in many organizations. So, more on the hard stuff. Or probably the other one isn't that soft as well. However, what I also see is, I hope that's readable, unclear value and complexity statements. So I'm not saying that there is not a nice business plan. Most of the time there is a business plan and also a value proposition. But what happens to the value after is if it is stated? Yeah, there's not that much of monitoring as we try to, or many people try to stick rather with conformance to a plan than adapting or responding to change caused by whatsoever environment or other change initiatives. This value proposition changes And it changes dramatically over time because we used to have large batch sizes within the initiatives, and there is no attention to kind of cost of delay or whatever should come first and what is the priority. So if you run 23 initiatives in parallel, what's the point of really achieving value? Because we are not changing just for the sake of changing. We want to deliver value, right? We want to do our business better. How can we do that if we interfere with different approaches at the same time? And there is the other aspect of complexity, because many change agents as well as managers tend to underestimate the social complexity in terms of winning people over, identifying and involving stakeholders, as Klaus has put it in his talk. And I think, yeah, the result is that we have even more problems. And we're slowing down the process, and yeah, many initiatives just get lost somewhere, at least stuck, without any idea how to overcome this kind of state. Yeah, finally, lack of agency, as I would like to put it. And I would like to borrow J. Bloom's definition of agency. He used that yesterday in his talk. It was about agency is informed by communion under conditions of uncertainty, which is a very precise definition as far as I'm concerned. And if you take communion and uncertainty, how the heck can we still rely on a single individual change agent? Which is still kind of a role model for many change initiatives in many organizations I see. Make sense to you? So there is kind of, yeah, it's not possible for an individual unless there is a plan that somehow gives the illusion of control to really respond to the change that is going on. Okay, so this is the problem statement, which brings us to the question, as I've promised, what can Kanban do for us? Non-transparency, what can Kanban do for us in this regard? Thanks, Pavel. For sure, a lot of things to visualize, and I will give you a few examples in a moment, what this can look like. Too many initiatives, also rather simple. For sure. Now it's called SIP limits, because it's about change in progress. However, it's the same principle. And for sure, we're talking about policies as well as all this fancy stuff we have learned about visualization. Unclear value and complexity, that's a tricky one. What would you apply? Metrics, policies, and I would highly recommend to win over your stakeholders in the first place, because if you don't convince them that the change is something that brings value to them, and you can, by using metrics, build up a control system that convinces them that there is something in it for them, then chances are good that you just get lost somewhere. And finally, lack of agency. What can we do about that? If it's not the individual change agent we would like to have. Yeah, build up leadership, whatever kind of guarding coalition is available and appropriate. Because as you will see, there is no one-size-fits-all approach, and I will show you in a minute what at least the boards can look like, we can work with when it comes to better manage the change management, or the changes we would like to see in place. Well, you might say a lot of these symptoms are not just familiar, but there is a root cause, an underlying root cause, combined with all this stuff. And you might say that's the root cause of still sticking too much to a command and control kind of leadership, right? And I would say you're probably right. Problem is that doesn't help managers that much. if we try to convince them, and I have to confess I also did, and probably still do, to make them become more agile, more systemic, more post-heroic, more whatsoever, you name it. Because how does management feel, how do senior managers feel when we try to convince that they have to change themselves, literally? What do you think? What is your experience convincing? So there is a nice ritual of bashing senior managers, but now the question is how to help them. And how do they feel if we try to somehow, subconsciously probably, just from our gestures, from the way we look at it, from the way we spread out rumors, whatsoever. But they feel not just pissed off with us, which is a special risk if you come in as an external consultant, but however, I think they resist because nobody wants to be changed. So we have to find other ways to win them over for the kind of transition they have to do, because there is no doubt that change is needed in the way we lead organizations and with the way we manage change. And here are some ways, some examples that I've tried out, and I would like to guide you quickly through it. 4 examples of very different levels. Klaus always calls the flight levels. So the first one, just to begin with, again, we get stuck for whatever reason.
Just click on the presentation.
Does it work? No. Jesus. It's stuck again. Yeah. Oh no, here we go, here we go. Thank you. Wonderful assistant. Okay, what can we see? And I've visualized the thing, especially to use it as a guidelines to have the right perspective on that. What we see is Kanban, Klaus talked about Kanban change team, that is kind of a guiding coalition for the implementation of Kanban. Here we're looking at a board they used. It's primarily a task board. They defined kind of the change flow they want to improve on. So what they have to do in order to come up finally with all they need to kick off the design and have a design in place, a tailor-made. And yep. And what else can we see? So yeah, first to complete my information around the guiding coalition. So they set up cross-functional as well as hierarchy bridging team of 4 people from various areas, including one of the managing directors, a team lead from the development, Klaus, you correct me if I quote wrongly, one salesperson, and a rather junior but very smart tester. So they have different points of view, and they try to, what you see here, the diamond-shaped post-its, they try to somehow limit the work that has to be done by person-oriented WIP limits, but they nevertheless clarified what they wanted to do and what comes next. And a lot of this long column is about running the interviews. I don't know how many of you have been at Klaus Talk as well? Okay, not that many. Okay, so it's about winning over your stakeholders by talking to them and getting more information on what they would like to build on, so what works well, and what they would like to see changed or improved on. So that's what this column is about. And within 2 weeks, they pulled all the tasks over to the done column, which basically meant that Klaus, who was running the system design workshop, had all the material he needed, including the buy-in of the stakeholders in terms of there was a consolidated list of dissatisfactions and areas to improve on. Does it make sense to you? So it's really kind of a funnel-oriented approach where the people who have been identified then met, asked what they like and what they don't like, and then it was consolidated. That's one approach how you can use Kanban to better visualize, to better organize your change initiative. That's just on the level of a task board. Different story. Somehow it doesn't work. So, different stories with a board. I've got permission to use the original board. It's from the Swiss Railways, or one IT department for sure. It's on the department level. And what they do is also for sure defining the process steps, or defining the stages of their change flow. We call it change bond. And as you can see, they have already a lot in the columns. So that's the initial state. They devoted some person-oriented WIP limits on that. And this, you see there are a lot of change initiatives have no sponsorship, actually. And they agreed on certain policies. And the interesting part here, in difference to what we've seen before, is that the guiding coalition consists of the leadership team, so the line management team. There's no extra or parallel structure. They have their weekly meetings in order to really build on a lot of feedback loops, and in order to monitor what is going on and have it visible. And that includes not just Kanban-related stuff, but also initiatives they want to focus on in terms of hold on a sec. In terms of aligning with other teams or driving marketing forward, so whatsoever. So that's a mixture of things to do. It's not just things that pop up from the team level, because underneath the department level there are 4 team levels, also using Kanban. And that's kind of the alignment board, where they try to get or hold control over decentralized control taking place on the team level. Okay. Question? Say?
Can you read out the headings?
The headings? Okay. It's called, so here they said it's a kind of backlog. Then they said kind of retrospective, so what they want to express, whether or not the labeling is right, that they have to select something based on kind of a value and complexity estimate. Then they said, okay, there is something they call preparation, so the first step of how to prepare for change. Then, I'm not translating because for sure it's in German. Now they said doing, so once it is prepared, it's kind of, you will see in a minute to do that differently, but here's the doing column, here are the results thing, and that's the done. So that's kind of a check column. Yeah. Does that answer your question? But you will see better with the next picture. Are we ready to move on? Okay. Not really. Okay, here we've got what is called an IT business improvement board. And what you see here quite nicely, that they designed used a different approach to design the change management or change board, because they included the well-known PDCA cycle. They labeled it a little bit different, but if I guide you through, it's what they call collected in terms of a placeholder for everything that pops up, or the queue. Then it said selected, and what you see here, they applied WIP limit, as there is already a WIP limit here of 6, and you see 6 initiatives currently going on. They set the WIP limit of selection on 0, which makes perfect sense in order to stop starting and start finishing. And they do work together, because it is an IT business improvement board focusing on application management. In this, it's an Austrian telecommunication company, and they're working together on a weekly basis in terms of kind of weekly stand-up. And they means all the sponsors that are selected, so actually these ones, yeah, as well as the ones that brought in kind of the backlog items. Does that make sense to you? What I really find quite intriguing is to run this cycle in order to indicate that most of the initiatives are not done with just one effort. Yeah? That doesn't necessarily mean they cycle forever. That wouldn't make any sense. But they pay more attention to planning, doing, checking, acting. So kind of a small loop within the bigger loop. Yeah? And that works pretty well for them. And they find a common understanding with bridging a lot of tensions between IT and business. Yeah?
So, if 6 is the limit for that whole
Yeah.
sense, and why 6?
Well, that's just a guess. They thought, okay, we start with 6. As we know, it's just a guess. And they will find out, recently they reduced it to 4. But however, they said, okay, that is going on and we want to do 6. Most important ones, there was a value proposition underlying and they were going on and it worked out quite nicely for them. Yeah. Okay, does that make sense to you? Last example.
So, the 4 quadrants are PDCA?
Hmm?
The 4 quadrants are PDCA or they
Yeah, PDCA. They labeled it a little bit different, but basically it's PDCA. Now I need your help again, please.
One finger.
Yeah, thanks. That's the right thing to do. Thanks. Okay, here the most sophisticated probably, it's called Strategic Innovation Board. And what it shows you is on the flow level, hope that's readable now, a clear, because I reconstructed, it's not the original board because I didn't get permission to use that. However, I tried to reconstruct and translate it as accurate as possible. You see what they used as the stages or steps in their change flow, including a kind of evaluation at the end, which is quite smart. And here's kind of starting point, because that's rather fresh in terms of a new experiment. And what's specific about that, now we are totally on a business unit top level. So the ones that are responsible for this board is a guiding coalition that has the permission from the management board to monitor and do whatever they can in order to make these change initiatives successful. Yeah. Mike?
What's the difference between change and management?
Well, actually they said it's just a timeline because they said after having said something on done, they agreed on 3 months later they will evaluate. So that might bring things back in the backlog. Thanks for clarifying. Okay, I have to speed up a bit. What can we see? What did they do? First of all, 2 sponsors for each initiative that has been selected, which is a quite nice approach because that's kind of an epic level. It's not about task board. Yeah, we're talking about epics. So underneath these epics or all these change initiatives, there are other teams working on, or other guiding coalitions working to make the things happen. Yeah? So actually these 2 sponsors are from the guiding coalition and are responsible for do whatever they can, selecting other people to help them in order to get finished as soon as possible, for sure in order to improve business. Yeah? And what else can we see? There are some fancy numbers because they agreed, that's part of their definition of done and their policies, that there will be a rough estimate. No, sorry. First of all, I have to tell you, who is taking care of kind of the queue replenishment? How does it work together with the guiding coalition and the line management? And they agreed on that the management board will do the queue replenishment meeting because that's the only way to make sure that there is an alignment or there is a clear link between what they want to change and what they want to achieve on an operative level. So strategic comes from the alignment of what they want to achieve with their business and how the change initiative supports to come up with better results. Does that make sense? Yeah, and that's a clever idea, actually a quite simple one, to still allow management to fulfill their responsibilities and to stick with their roles, whereas they send a guiding coalition because they don't have the time simply to pay enough attention and to do all the efforts that are needed to come to completion as soon as possible. So really to, I'm allowed to say, drive change. However, to do whatever they can to make this happen and to finish it and to really deliver value. And that's quite a nice idea. And then the management board, consulted with the guiding coalition, estimates in terms of value. So what value do they expect from which initiative, and complexity. So they kind of balance in terms of what is going on, and they apply metrics in terms of not just finding out about the cycle time of each initiative, but they also measure how long it takes for one initiative with, let's say, 7.5 to stay in plan and in do and in check and in act. So they get a lot of data as to winning more information about what they can do to make change happen. Yeah? And that's just an effort they are busy with at the moment in order to get more validated, or to empower more validated learning. Yeah? Because if we don't measure or don't start measuring change initiatives, we are doomed to failure again. Yeah, that's what they thought about. Okay, stakeholders around I've already already mentioned. So now I see if I'm able to distill it. Yeah, well, final lessons. What I've learned so far, jointly visualizing the change process, talking about guiding coalition with assistance and for sure with the mandate by top management. That helps a lot to define and to come, not just to learn to see, but really to come to kind of a strategy to manage flow instead of a plan. Yeah, we'll talk about change flow for sure. Secondly, what I've learned is that the guiding coalition, especially when it is cross-functional and hierarchy bridging, helps a lot to use a lot more perspectives and points of view as just the ones that could be provided by a single change agent. And intensifies validated learning. Yeah, it's a lot about communication, a lot about feedback loops, and they are kind of enhanced by applying change management with Kanban, as far as I've learned. But still, my final warning will be about that we shouldn't forget that it's still a political and cultural challenge. So it's not just about a pragmatic approach, but it's really dealing with emotions, as we've heard before from Esther. It's about networks and people, and it's not a trivial effort. We shouldn't underestimate the complexity, in other words. Okay, thank you very much for listening. That was it. I think I'm too late now.